Life as a chosen one is not typical. You follow a path that is sometimes misunderstood, one that necessitates stillness, discipline, and a deep connection with the divine. Even if you are set aside, some practices might muddy your spiritual ears and prevent you from properly hearing God's message. These behaviors may appear little to the rest of the world, yet they represent significant challenges to someone called to a greater cause. Removing them will improve your discernment, strengthen your spirit, and bring you closer to God's whispering. Before we go into this profound instruction, I want to remind you that if you're new to our channel, you should subscribe so you don't miss out on great lessons like this. And if you are certain that this communication arrived at the exact time you needed it, typing 1111 in the comments area indicates heavenly harmony and benefits streaming into your life. Now, let us look at the 9 behaviors that a chosen one must abandon in order to hear God's message clearly. Overthinking every circumstance, even king, is one of the most significant roadblocks to hearing God's message. God's speech is generally simple, peaceful, and soothing, yet overthinking causes noise, drowning out his murmurs. When the chosen one fills their mind with endless analysis, uncertainties, what-ifs, and fear-driven scenarios, they generate such mental confusion that divine direction is practically hard to perceive. Overthinking is like raising the volume of your ideas to maximum damage while God speaks softly and steadily. You miss his voice because your thoughts are too loud. Many chosen ones fall into this trap because they believe they must control every consequence, prepare every detail, and predict every option. But the fact is that God never intended us to bear that load. He already knows the route, and his word instructs us to believe and not rely on our own wisdom. Overthinking causes undue tension, worry, and confusion. It makes you feel you're being productive when, in reality, you're just tiring yourself. To properly hear God, you must quiet the mental maelstrom. This necessitates resignation, letting go of the illusion of control and believing that divine timing is impeccable. Instead of constantly asking questions, selected ones must learn to rest in faith and obedience. When you stop overthinking, you create a clear spiritual space for God to come in and guide you directly. His replies are not always sophisticated. They typically manifest as calm, simplicity, and tranquility. If you surround yourself with negative individuals, you will be unable to hear God clearly. Energy is contagious, and the people you surround yourself with have a significant impact on your spiritual clarity. Negative individuals are spiritual pests. They deplete your energy, create seeds of doubt, increase dread, and continuously expose you to words and acts that contradict divine truth. Spending time with individuals who gossip, whine, criticize, or live in fear allows their energy to permeate into your spirit. Before long, their voices become louder than God's, and you begin to doubt what God has spoken. This is why the Bible warns us that bad company may ruin excellent character. The chosen ones must be extremely intentional about their circle. You cannot expect to grow spiritually if you are constantly surrounded by individuals who bring you down with negativity. Spiritual discernment necessitates clarity, which cannot exist with incessant noise and poisonous influence. When you create space away from negativity, your frequency rises, your peace grows, and you suddenly discover that God's message is easier to hear. He wasn't silent before. Your spirit was too muddled to hear him. Chosen ones must recognize that separation is sometimes required for advancement. You are not meant to blend in with everyone, since your destiny necessitates a greater level of alignment. Protect your spirit and the surroundings, and heavenly guidance will flow more freely than before. 3. Holding on to the past, the voice of God is always urging you ahead. However, Many selected ones become mired in the past, whether it's previous errors, heartbreaks, failures, or regrets. Living in yesterday muffles divine instruction. The more you remember what happened, the more difficult it is to hear what God is saying now. Clinging to the past adds unneeded weight on your spiritual ears. God's voice is fresh. It talks in the current moment, directing you to the destiny He has planned for you. If you are always thinking about what could have been or what should have occurred, you will lose out on the beauty of what God is doing right now. Chosen ones frequently hang onto prior trauma because it seems secure, familiar, or unresolved. However, holding on hinders mending, which is important for hearing. Consider attempting to listen to someone speak while playing a tape from the past at full power. You will not hear anything new. That's what holding onto the past does to your spirit. To hear God clearly, you must stop rehearsing former chapters and totally engage in the current moment. Forgive yourself, let go of others, and believe that what has passed will never determine your future. The past may have influenced you, but it lacks the authority to lead you. Only God does when you resign yesterday to His care. He talks clearly about tomorrow. His speech reminds you that you are not defined by history. You are summoned to destiny for forsaking rest and stillness. Chosen ones frequently push themselves too hard, believing that continual action is the path to success. However, resting is not the same as being lazy. It is about alignment. God's voice cannot compete with continual noise, activity, or distraction. In a world that values hustling and constant work, chosen ones may forget that stillness is holy. The Bible states, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness is the most conducive environment for hearing heavenly whispers. When you overlook periods of relaxation, meditation, or isolation, you deprive your spirit of tranquility. It has to tune in to God's wavelength. Many people ask why they can't discern God's will, but the truth is that they never slow down enough to hear it. Imagine attempting to listen to a radio station while driving at full speed over static. It will always be unclear. The same thing occurs spiritually when you live in continual cacophony. Rest helps your soul replenish and your spirit refocus. Silence permits you to hear the intricacies of God's whispers, which are frequently missed in the turmoil. Even Jesus went to secluded locations to pray and speak with the Father, providing an example for the chosen ones. If the Son of God valued stillness, then how much more should we? Resting does not imply you are doing nothing. It indicates you're preparing yourself to hear whatever God has for you. When you appreciate rest, you honor God, and His voice comes through clearly. 5. Relying too heavily on human views. One of the most harmful tendencies for chosen ones is to seek affirmation and direction from others rather than God. Human voices are loud, compelling, and always changing, but God's voice is consistent, eternal, and true. When you rely too much on the views of others, you risk mistaking their words for the divine. Insecurity is generally the root cause of this tendency. The need for approval, validation, or reassurance from others around you. A selected one must recognize that their path is distinct and others who cannot perceive your destiny cannot. Guided, worldly advice may appear reasonable, but rationality does not necessarily imply heavenly guidance. God may instruct you to take a leap of faith that others consider silly, and if you depend on their judgment, you will lose out on a benefit. Remember, Noah was derided for building the ark, but he was following God's instructions, not man's. The voice of God will always surpass men's opinions, but you must decide which one is more important. Overvaluing human voices has the potential to pull you away from your mission. God's voice may encourage you to wait, while others urge you to rush. He may tell you to forgive, while others advise you to maintain a grudge. Who will you be listening to? The chosen ones must learn to disconnect from worldly approval and tune their ears to a higher frequency. The more you appreciate God's view of a guy, the more distinct his voice will become in your life. 6. Neglecting prayer and spiritual discipline. Prayer is more than simply a ritual. It is connection with God that serves as the lifeline for the selected ones. When you stop praying, fasting, or engaging in other spiritual activities, you lose your ability to discern God's voice, just as a relationship cannot thrive without continuous contact. When you do not pray, your relationship to God decreases. Too many chosen ones underestimate the effectiveness of constant spiritual practice. They only pray when they are in difficulty or need something, regarding God as an emergency service rather than a permanent presence. But sincere prayer is more than just asking. It is about aligning, listening, and communing with the divine. Setting aside daily time to pray, meditate, study, scripture, or worship improves your spiritual discernment. You grow more receptive to God's whispers, more conscious of his nudges, and more content with his guidance. Neglecting these exercises is equivalent to letting your spiritual phone die. You will not hear God's summons since the line has been severed. The world is full with diversions and voices vying for your attention. And without spiritual discipline, it's easy to mistake them for God. Fasting, for example, calms the flesh, allowing the spirit to ascend and tune in more clearly. Prayer unlocks the gates of heaven, making you susceptible to heavenly guidance. Discipline keeps you steady even when your emotions change. If you want to hear God clearly, you can't afford to be casual about your spiritual practice. Consistency is essential because it educates your soul to remain in harmony regardless of the season of life you are in. 7. Holding onto unforgiveness, anger, hatred, and grudges create spiritual obstacles, making it harder for the chosen one to hear God. The voice of God is founded on love, peace, and truth, but unforgiveness poisons your heart and distorts your vision. When you keep grudges, you carry poisonous energy that weighs on your spirit and impairs your judgment. Forgiveness is not about condoning the wrongs done to you. It is about freeing yourself from the bonds of bitterness. Many chosen ones suffer in this area because they bear profound hurts. But what they don't know is that holding onto unforgiveness causes more harm to them than to the one who inflicted the hurt. It's like ingesting poison and expecting others to suffer. The longer you hang on, the heavier your spirit grows, the more difficult it is to hear God. His word pours naturally into hearts that are light and receptive, unburdened by animosity. Forgiveness is not a weakness. It is a spiritual cleaning. It allows you to completely embrace your spiritual calling without emotional baggage. Even Jesus emphasized forgiveness in prayer, instructing us to beg God to forgive ourselves just as we forgive others. The fact is that carrying grudges prevents you from hearing God properly, because his speech cannot exist in a heart full of hatred. Let go of the resentment. When you let go of animosity, your spiritual ears will become sharper. Forgiveness creates room for love. Love is the clearest conduit through which God communicates. 8. Living in fear rather than faith. Fear is one of the most powerful opponents of divine insight. It speaks lies that contradict God's truth, calling into doubt what he has previously promised. You distort the frequency of God's voice. Fear causes restlessness, anxiety, and uncertainty. While religion provides calm, confidence, and assurance, the two cannot coexist since fear paralyzes and faith mobilizes. The chosen ones must realize that God does not cause fear. It is the enemy's instrument for silencing divine instruction. God communicates with certainty and hope, but fear adds confusion and concern. When you let fear rule your life, you block your spiritual ears. Consider attempting to listen to a tranquil music while static from dread keeps intruding. It becomes hard to listen clearly. This is what happens spiritually when you are always worried. In contrast, faith is God's language. According to the Bible, pleasing God is impossible without faith. Faith exposes your spirit to heavenly guidance because it trusts. Even when there is no obvious evidence, it states, "I believe because he said it, not because I saw it." To hear God clearly, you must overcome your fear and embrace trust. This does not imply that you will never be terrified. It indicates you won't allow fear influence your decisions. Every time you choose faith over fear, you raise your frequency to match God's, making his instruction more audible, obvious, and unmistakable in your life. 9. Chasing the world rather than the Spirit. Many selected ones become sidetracked by money, position, or other goods, forgetting that these things will never replace divine purpose. The more you chase the world, the less you will hear from God. His voice is not discovered in an everlasting pursuit of money or validation. It is discovered via submission, obedience, and walking in your calling. Chasing the world perpetuates a cycle of discontent because the flesh never feels satiated. You may achieve prosperity, but neglecting your spirit will leave you feeling empty. The chosen one must recognize that true success stems from aligning with God's will rather than pursuing what the world celebrates. When you emphasize monetary gain over spiritual progress, you muffle the sound of God's instruction. He may be asking you to have trust in your calling, but the cacophony of worldly ambition tempts you to pursue transitory pleasures instead. The fact is that God is not opposed to prosperity or success, but he asks that your heart seek him first. When your spirit is in harmony, he will bring you benefits without grief. Chasing the Spirit provides tranquility, clarity, and ultimate fulfillment, while seeking the world causes fatigue, emptiness, and distraction. The chosen ones must refocus their concentration. Seek first the kingdom of God, and the rest will fall into place. Quit putting worldly acceptance before a divine mission, and you will notice that his voice gets louder, clearer, and irrefutable. The more you follow the Spirit, the more the world seeks you out. The chosen one. God's voice is constantly speaking, but whether you hear it depends on the behaviors you choose to maintain or abandon. Quit these 9 behaviors, and you'll notice a difference. Divine clarity, spiritual assurance, and tranquility that beyond all comprehension. Remember that your destiny demands alignment, and alignment necessitates discipline. The Bloom Channel. If this message spoke to you, put 1111 in the comment section to invite divine blessings and clarity into your life. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any communications intended to guide your journey as a chosen one. Thank you for watching.